August 5th just continues to look like one of the biggest days of the recruiting season for the Ducks.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time. Once again for Locked On Ducks, I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, a take on Oregon's wide receiver room, and I'm going to compare Josh Conerly to Oregon's secondary. I'm going to pull it off. I promise. It's going to be really good. All on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So, another day, another dollar, another missed Oregon recruiting target in the class of 2026. At least that's how it feels. It's not actually how it is. Oregon has a top 25 class. Washington did pick up a guy, so the Huskies on 24/7's rankings are one slot ahead of the Ducks right now. That I tell you, it's huge. It's huge. Some follow that more than others. Curious to see how that all shakes out. But Kelvin Obot is one of the top 10 offensive tackles in this class of 2026, and he has chosen to go to Utah. Now, certainly no fault in that. The last high-profile offensive tackle recruit I remember coming down to Oregon and Utah, there were other schools in the mix too, but when he was choosing between those two schools, it was Spencer Fano, who's going to start for Utah this year and then be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. It's not exactly a place where you scratch your head and go, man, why did he go there? What could he possibly see? Like, back in the day, hindsight's 2020, of course, when Teteroa McMillan was going to go to Oregon, then he went to Arizona, it was kind of going, I was going, what? He's going to Arizona? Wow, that was a heck of a pull there for the Wildcats, and that worked out. He went on to be a first-round pick. I believe he went to the Panthers. So the reason I mentioned August 5th continuing to look like the biggest date is that's when Emmanuel Iheanacho commits. So Jackson Cantwell off the board to Miami. Obot was one of the next high-profile offensive tackle recruits Oregon's going after, and he goes to Utah. Now, Tommy Tofi is out there. Tofi is listed on 24/7 as an offensive tackle. Might be more of an interior guy. That's the way Brian Smith has talked to me about him in the past. But that's someone who Oregon does have a crystal ball prediction for. Nothing has come down on that front. The work to try to flip him from Cal could be well underway. They, of course, just did that with an offensive lineman. So could they do it again? Yeah, it's pretty feasible. Oregon, Cal, look, no disrespect to the Bears. These two programs recruit at different levels. But Cal does usually underachieve and has untapped potential on the recruiting trail. I digress. Emmanuel Iheanacho, when you don't have Obot and when you don't have Cantwell, he's got a quote-unquote warmer designation over on 24/7 Sports. Penn State is in the fold amongst others, and if Oregon doesn't land him, it's going to be reflected upon as a tough cycle for Elite Terry and the boys up front. Oregon currently is sitting at one offensive line commit in this class of 2026, and I think that they are certainly capable of, pulling some rabbits out of the hat. I don't see it as some massive position of need that they need to go and stack, 7 to 10 interior or offensive linemen or both or whatnot. But, Kaloy Kelly is the guy they flipped from Cal, and not a super highly rated guy. Doesn't mean he can't be a starting guard or center one day for the Ducks, but that's the only offensive lineman Oregon has at the moment. And the other guy they could get is Tofi, as I mentioned. But if they don't get Iheanacho, there certainly won't be a crown jewel in the recruiting trail as far as offensive linemen go. So that's the latest piece of news. But there are other names that are going to be committing here in the next couple of weeks. So one name to keep an eye on that, frankly, I've not talked about enough here on the show is Calvin Russell. So Calvin Russell is committing in 3 days. That is this Saturday, and I'll have a reaction to that commitment on Tuesday's show rather than Monday's. But I think that name is one for Duck fans to know because it was a little. I'm not saying set your expectations high. It was a little bit of a surprise that Russell had Oregon in his final three, along with Florida State, and that Syracuse was not in the fold because they'd been recruiting him for quite a long time. But Russell's a 5-star wide receiver, and that would be a landmark moment for new wide receiver coach Ross Douglas. Now, Messiah Hampton is, of course, the guy that he landed first at the wide receiver spot and was recently at a camp. My longtime everydayers will remember the name John Garcia, former recruiting guy here at the network, and still does a bunch of great work in the recruiting space. He's a good follow on Twitter. He had Messiah Hampton at his top standout at a camp that he recently attended, and Hampton is absolutely a stud. But if Calvin Russell is next in the fold at wide receiver, our confidence level that Ross Douglas can sustain the success that Junior Adams laid the foundation for in the last few years should go up considerably. So I was a little surprised that Russell was listing Oregon is listing Oregon as a finalist, but he commits this weekend, and if he picks the Ducks, that would catapult the rankings significantly. They're number 23 nationally according to 24/7 metrics. I bet Russell would push them inside the top 15, and then if they landed Iheanacho, they'd be inside the top 10. And the volume on this class is still, frankly, pretty small. They're at 11 hard commits at the moment, but their average recruiting ranking is really high thanks to guys like Kendra Harrison and Jet Washington, the two 5-stars of the class. But the other names to watch for within the next week or so, Jalen Lott is listed as an athlete, probably a wide receiver. He commits next Tuesday, July 8th. And then Nick Abrams is a 4-star linebacker, highly rated guy, top 24/7 player who commits on July 16th. And Alabama, Michigan, and Georgia are the schools that are in the folder. He's just outside the top 247 in the composite rating, but a top 20 linebacker in the country. And you pair him with Tristan Phillips, that could be a dynamic duo. And Tristan Phillips is not just a dude because he came on this show and talked smack about Washington from time to time. Dude can be a darn good football player, and that would be a pretty sweet linebacker tandem to have. But right now, Oregon's staring at 6 offensive commits and 6 defensive commits, 5 offensive commits in this cycle. I expect that balance to continue just given the array of prospects that they are looking at, the guys that they're after and finalists and everyone that they're considering. But those are definitely the names to watch for within the next couple of weeks as Oregon tries to surge on the recruiting trail. And certainly they have made some gains, getting Bryson Beaver and Jet Washington and flipping Kelly at the end of Kaloy Kelly, that is at the very end of June. They wound up with 4 commits in the month of June. Solid, not elite, not the best they've ever done, but certainly solid, not in a disaster area, and the commitment should start to roll in here in the month of July. At least that's what we hope for. I did think it would be a busier June, admittedly. I thought it would be a slightly more productive, busier month for on the commitment front for the Ducks, but nevertheless, they're still in a solid spot, and those are the names to know for now until the next batch rolls through, of course. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. Is Dakorien Moore overshadowing another receiver in Oregon's room? It's totally possible. First, this episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Have you had that one financial goal you want to get serious about? Maybe it's saving a certain threshold. Maybe it's getting ready for a big purchase, or maybe it's paying off debt. Whatever it is, Monarch Money is here to help. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off for your first year. Check them out at monarchmoney.com. I love me some Dakorien Moore talk, because the more I think about the highest rated receiver commit in the history of Oregon football, the more I get excited. No pun intended, but in retrospect, I'm not unhappy that it happened. So if you want to submit a YouTube comment question, you can do that. You could submit a question via Twitter. You could become a Locked On Ducks insider. You can also submit takes for Spencer's Scale of Agreement, which is a wildly fun segment we've been doing here on the show. So, Zaheem sends this one in for Spencer's Scale of Agreement. J-Mac, I'm presuming that's Jeremiah McLaughlin because I don't know who else it would be, and Dakorien combined for 1,500 receiving yards and over 15 touchdowns. Outside of Gary Bryant Jr. and Justice Lowe, I see these guys shining. Look for J-Mac and Dakorien to be our wide receiver 1 and 2 by the end of the season. Wow. There is no doubt amidst all the talent in the wide receiver room that Jeremiah McLaughlin is one of the overlooked ones, because this is a guy who was committed to Ohio State once upon a time, flipped to the Ducks, and is a top 15 wide receiver in his 2024 recruiting class and a top 70 player nationally. Dude was a big time recruiting news, or was big time recruiting news when he flipped to the Ducks. So 6 foot, 190 pounds. We only saw him in mop-up duty last year. What we have seen from him in the spring game, I'm definitely encouraged by. He actually kind of reminds me of Messiah Hampton, Oregon's lone receiver commit in the class of 2026, where I don't know that he has one trait that stands out as sparkling or startlingly good or exceptional, which is not a bad thing. It's a really good thing. He does everything well. I think this is a guy you could line up at a number of different positions. He's probably, when we have seen him in the spring game, he looks thicker, kind of reminds me a little bit of Braylon Addison, where he looks like someone that could do a lot of different things for your receiving core. Where we've seen him primarily is taking downfield shots and playing in that outside receiver position. So without Evan Stewart, the opportunity is certainly there for someone like a Jeremiah McLaughlin to step up and have a role. And Dakorien Moore is in that boat as well. I continue to wonder, anytime I talk about the receiver room, about Malik Benson, the Florida State transfer, because, man, I don't know what to expect. The physical traits are intriguing. He had a bad spring game. He only, I think, had one ball really thrown his way, and he dropped it running down the field. But if you notice, he had that separation because he's, 6'1", 190 pounds and runs like the wind. So I don't know with him. 2 years of JUCO ball, 2 years of Power 4 ball. Oregon's now his third school at the Power 4 ranks, his fourth overall school. Like, does he pop and have an 800-plus yard season? I don't know. McLaughlin, on the other hand, is certainly someone who was recruited to Oregon with the expectation from someone like me that he would be one of your top 2 receivers in a good receiving core one day. Is this year that happens? Maybe. Maybe he steps right in. He kind of reminds me of a bigger-bodied Evan Stewart, who's probably a little bit quicker than McLaughlin. I think I compared McLaughlin coming out of high school to Chase Cota, who, when he eventually made his way to Oregon from UCLA, I thought was a really good receiver and was just solid with everything across the board. And so I wonder where he falls on the depth chart, but is there an inherently greater likelihood that Dakorien Moore gets more snaps than Jeremiah McLaughlin this year? I think slightly, but I don't think that there's a Grand Canyon-sized gap there, just because Dakorien probably lines up in the slot as his primary position of wide receiver, and McClellan's probably more of an outside guy. And I think there's more experience on the outside with guys like Malik Benson, Jurion Dickey, Kyler Casper than there are guys at the slot. Now, Justice Lowe can line up anywhere, so can Gary Bryant Jr., but yeah, I think the young receiving core is going to be really, really exciting, really, really fun to watch. So them combining for 1,500 yards, I wonder if you're seeing a big discrepancy. Like, why don't we say Dakorien Moore sets the Oregon freshman receiving record, at least from the data that I've been able to find. I haven't had that 100% confirmed, but if you go look at every freshman receiver's season, I haven't found one better than Darren Carrington, over 700 yards. Sometimes you guys have even more time on your hands than me, and you can find that sort of stuff. So if you can't, by all means, shoot it my way. But I believe the best freshman receiving season in the history of Oregon football is Darren Carrington, around 700, just over 700 yards. So let's say Dakorien goes past that. Are you saying he's maybe in the 900 range and J-Mac is in the 600 range? I can see it. I just think you might look at this Oregon receiving core at the end of the year and nobody even has 700 receiving yards. Like there is so much talent and so many different guys to get the ball to. Plus you have to throw Kenyon Sadiq in there. So J-Mac and Dakorien for 1,500 yards. I'm going to put a 3 on that one because I don't think you're going to just you wouldn't be completely isolating or, leaving behind other guys like Gary Bryant Jr. and Justice Lowe and Malik Benson, Jurion Dickey, Kyler Casper. At the very least, by the end of the year, you'd be reducing their role. I don't really see that happening. I think Gary Bryant and Justice Lowe are two guys that step up big time in the absence of Evan Stewart because they're the most veteran guys in that room. And we've seen what they can do in Oregon uniforms, and they know the offense pretty well. So, yeah, I think that I like where your head's at because I would love if Dakorien Moore just popped off. The hype train would be unlike anything we've seen for an Oregon skill position freshman probably since DeAnthony Thomas. So yeah, I'd be here for that. David sends this one in. Spencer agreement. John Neal is the greatest talent evaluator in modern Duck history. Patrick Chung, 2-star. Walter Thurman, 2-star. Jarris Bird, 2-star. Recruited 3-star Jeff Mail at safety. Imagine the hits. Chip needed wide receivers. He recruited 3-star Kenyon Barner to play corner. But when Chip was a Duck, the best athletes ended up on offense. 4-star Boyette's ball skills were spotted by Neal before he blew up his senior year. So, for those who don't know, and I'll admit I had to do a quick little deep dive myself, John Neal was a coach on Oregon's staff back in the day who recruited these guys. And, what I thought about, greatest talent evaluator, that's a big title, but I did not remember Patrick Chung, who went on to have an NFL career, and Walter Thurman made the league, and Jarris Bird made the league, and all those guys were so good, and they were not highly rated recruits. I don't know that speaks to his talent evaluator as much as his talent developer, but I understand the spirit with which you're asking the question, so I'll put an 8.5 on that, because that is a pretty insane run of lowly rated guys that turned into just absolute stud and all-conference caliber players that many times went on to have NFL careers. But it got me thinking about Chris Hampton, because Chris Hampton was 24/7's Recruiter of the Year for what he did, bringing in the greatest defensive back haul in the history of Oregon football in the class of 2025. Headlined, but not limited to, Naeem Offord, the number 1 corner. So when you were listing all these names off, David, I thought to myself, wow, look at where Oregon has gone from taking guys like that and maximizing their potential based on their recruiting, what their recruiting profile was, to now going out and landing some of the best defensive back prospects in the country. I think Ife Obadegwu is going to be a stud at corner this year. I think Naeem Offord could be an absolute baller. I think Dorian Brew can be really good. I think Trey McNutt can be really good. All of these names, all of these guys, it's just a completely different era. And it's not close to when these guys were playing Oregon football, but does it feel like it was that long ago? No, not necessarily. So I've come to appreciate Chris Hampton, and it's also made me realize that a guy who has recruited as well as he has with, the co-defensive coordinator tag, I would frankly be pleasantly surprised if he's on Oregon staff next year, because he already got some looks or minor interest at least to be a defensive coordinator somewhere, a full-time defense coordinator this offseason. He'll get that role. He'll get that role with the way when you recruit as a position coach and you want to be a coordinator, that is perhaps the strongest feather you can put into your cap. Results on the field matter too, but when you can recruit, whether you're talking about a head coach, assistant coach, coordinator, whatever, schools are going to give you more of a look than they would someone else with equal or less production, because if you can bring guys to your school, turns out that's a pretty significant part of the game. So, David, I'll give you an 8.5 on that Spencer scale of agreement, and just a tip of the cap to Chris Hampton for how good he is as a recruiter, and he keeps stacking up the wins in these last couple cycles. So, I'm going to do something that seems crazy, impossible, unattainable. It's not. I'm going to compare Oregon secondary to Josh Conerly. Just you wait. Quick note before I make my insane comparison of Conerly and the DBs. I saw in the color assignment for fans at the home games this year, it's wear black against Oregon State. Who made that decision and why? And can you change it, please, to green or yellow? Not one of the Beavers' primary colors. No. Wear black against USC. USC should always be a blackout game because 2009 was on Halloween night when Oregon took the crown as kings of the Pac-10. That was an iconic moment that also made a lot of sense. Halloween, black, right? Like we understand that. The Beavs wear black. Like no. Wear that should be a wear green day. Now, if they keep it as wear black, you don't want the stadium looking checkered, I guess. But man, use your heads, people. Come on now. Come on. That should be a wear green all the way. All right. Let's get to this thought that I had that occurred to me on the golf course the other day, in case you're wondering what goes through my head out there. I mean, when I'm hitting a shot, that's all I'm thinking about. But then in between shots, my mind goes to all sorts of places. So, Josh Conerly was, I believe, the number one offensive tackle of his class in 2022. One of the earliest recruiting wins Dan Lanning picked up. He was number one by 24/7. The composite had him as number two offensive tackle nationally. I'd say he lived up to the billing because he did. And so Conerly made me think of the secondary because he came onto campus as a really highly rated recruit and as a true freshman had a very limited role. It was be the jumbo tackle, and that was it. That was all he did. And then he upgraded or progressed or was developed, might I say. My everydayers will get that one. To being the starting left tackle, and he was good. Oregon's offensive line was good in 2023. Josh Conerly was good. Was he great? No. He was not great. He was good. He was not great. Then 2024 begins. The O-line gets off to an iffy start, but Conerly's looking pretty good. And then he becomes a reliable player at that position, the likes of which we haven't seen since Penei Sewell. To where in big spots in the game, you remember from Ducks versus them against Ohio State, Dan Lanning said in a team meeting with his coaches, when we're in a big spot, I want to get the ball to my best players. We're in a situation we need to pick up some yards. I want Jordan James and Josh Conerly being involved. And 3rd and 6, pretty gutsy call. If that hadn't worked, can you imagine the YouTube play callers? If that, what turned out to be the game-winning drive against Ohio State on October 12th, if that drive had been thwarted by a 3rd and 6 toss call, ooh boy, that would have been discussed a lot, but it worked out. They ran behind Conerly, got it to Jordan James first down, they win the game. We all remember that. So, Conerly, by the time he reaches the Big Ten championship game, is putting the clamps on Abdul Carter, who was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. And Conerly parlays that performance, not exclusively, but really heavily, into being a first-round pick of the Commanders, and now their franchise left tackle to protect Jaden Daniels, their franchise quarterback. So I bring this up and compare it to the secondary because my expectation, I come across plenty of comments and people that say, this is going to be the best secondary Oregon's ever had. Look at all the talent in there. Yes, the talent is real. And what I have consistently said and continue to triple, quintuple, septuple down on, however many times I've discussed it this offseason, that unit is going to be the best Oregon's had in 2026, assuming Dylan Thieneman comes back, which we'll see if that winds up being the case. They have the talent to make it really good, even if he doesn't. But Conerly was the number 2 offensive tackle. And the first year that he played, he was good. And I bet you he'd be the first guy to say this. From when he started early in season 2 to the end of season 2, he became a significantly better football player. It is easy to get caught up in recruiting rankings and potential with all these guys. I know the potential's there. It's why I'm excited when they land them. It's why I'm excited when they don't go in the portal. It's why I'm excited about what Oregon's team, or what the secondary specifically, will be in 26. So this year, because most of these guys had a redshirt season last year, like Ife Obadegwu, for instance, and having Jalil Florence back is certainly big, I view this year as comparable to Josh Conerly's second season. He's where he was good. I make no mistake about it. I expect Oregon's secondary to be good. I think 2026 is going to give the 2019 secondary a run for its money, which by my account is the best secondary I've ever seen Oregon football have. There is probably one back in like the late 2000s with, the guys I mentioned earlier, Chung and Bird and Thurman. Like those were dudes. Those were dudes. That 2019 secondary was legit. And 26 will be phenomenally awesome. You could have Ife Obadegwu at one corner and Naeem Offord at the other. You could have Dylan Thieneman at safety. Trey McNutt could be one of the safeties, or Kingston Lopa could be one of the safeties. I don't know who the nickel will be. Like, there's so many options. It excites me just thinking about it. But I bring this up to serve as a reminder that even when you have really talented players, it is never, ever fair to expect them to be as good as they will be, or what you expect them to be based on the recruiting ranking in their first year playing. Josh Conerly had an individual game grade at Washington in 2023 against Braylon Trice, who's a good player for the Huskies. He had a PFF grade of 8 in that game when he was blocking Braylon Trice. 8. Then Abdul Carter was neutralized in the Big Ten championship game. That's the range that college kids can undergo. Now, some kids pick it up faster than others, to be sure. I bet the secondary by game 10 will be better than game 1. But I'm glad Oregon gets to ease their way into the season a bit schedule-wise, as you will hear about in the next few shows, so that you don't have Penn State till game 5. You don't have the USC passing attack until later in the year, or Indiana coming to Autzen later in the season. I'm glad you get some games under your belt there. So had that thought, and thought I would share. I'm going out of town, so you will have... Don't worry, the shows are still going to come into your feed. If there's any breaking news in the next few days, you're going to have to wait on my reaction for that. Follow Locked On Ducks on Twitter. I'll tweet out instant reaction stuff there, but I'll cover it all in the show next week. But Thursday through Monday, we're taped ahead. I've got a trip coming where I will not have access to the internet I need to do shows. So plenty of crossovers coming your way to learn about Oregon's schedule. Hope you all enjoy. I think you will. And you get to see some of the other hosts at our wonderful Locked On Network, which I have the privilege of working with, who I have the privilege of working with all the time over on Locked On College Football. I know you will enjoy. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.